We're about to join another amazing talk, but just before we do, I want to say a huge thank you to our sponsors, speakers, and you, our wonderful audience, for making this event possible. With expert presentations and inspirational discussions on the agenda, you are in for a real treat today. Please ensure you are sharing your feedback and asking all questions in the comment section of the video, as our speakers will be answering them throughout their session. After the event, a great place to continue the conversation is in the Developer Marketing Alliance Slack community, where you will be able to connect with peers, get access to fresh content, and discover new opportunities. I'll be posting the sign-up link regularly in the comments, so if you're not already involved, keep your eyes peeled and join the discussion. And remember, you can gain on-demand access to all of our exclusive event footage with the DMA Pro membership. So with all that in mind, let's dive back in.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Kendall Hershey. I am head of developer marketing here at DocuSign, where I've been for the last 3 years, working to build our developer community and increase adoption for our APIs. But I've had a lot of hard-won lessons about product feedback in my career, and I just wanted to take a little bit of time to share some of those lessons with you all, help teach you how you can build your credibility and turn your community into fanatics. Let's start by saying that this is not a quick wins program. Feedback is a really long game, so know that going into it. We're also just going to scratch the surface today. There's a lot of depth here, but I figured I'd want to focus on some strong starting points for anyone who's looking to start a program, or some just nuggets that I've been able to uncover throughout my career. All right. A few things to keep in mind about developers as a persona. They have really high expectations for the companies that they engage with. Companies have learned that working with the folks that are building with your company to provide them with a strong experience is a really beneficial partnership for both parties. So they've really worked to improve that experience. And that's given developers a really high set of expectations for the companies that they're building with. That's not a bad thing at all. It's just something for us to know as we go forward with how we gather and collect feedback. They also have a high degree of influence in sales and technology decisions. This is something that's often overlooked because they're not a persona we traditionally think about being at the sales table, but they make a lot of those technology decisions, and oftentimes it's based off of that development experience. Their opinion holds a lot of weight to the folks that are sitting at that sales table. And they really prefer to self-serve first. So when they come to you, they're going to try to get as far as they possibly can in their development journey or their buying journey before they ever engage anyone. So that's just a good thing to keep in mind. And lastly, they are a very direct set of folks, and they are not shy when it comes to feedback. I encounter feedback on a really, really regular basis at every company I've ever worked for. And some folks might look at a tweet like this and get a little bit scared or nervous because it could come off as really negative. Another day at work, another day of severe aggravation while trying to work with DocuSign. They very clearly outline the anxiety that it's causing them. They give us a recommendation of how to improve it, make it appear by default, make it easier to find. I look at something like this and I'm really thankful that they took the time to share this with us, because it gives us an opportunity to improve a subpar experience that we might not have known about otherwise. So all feedback, even sometimes when it's really direct, is a good thing. So, take that directness with a little bit of grain of salt as you're going through this, and really just see the positives that come through. Let's talk a little bit about who all should be involved in the product feedback cycle, because it's probably more than you might have originally thought. First and foremost is product management, and they get a big gold star here because product feedback is really something that they need to own and have a really large stake in. They're the folks that are going to ensure that the company is committing resources to those community sourced requests. So they have to be on board with a program like this. They're also going to be the ones that are scoping the requests, understanding what it would take to implement, and doing things like prioritizing bug fixes. You should also be working with your developer evangelism team if you have one. They represent and communicate with the community. So when they're talking to product, they represent your developer community. And when they're talking to the developer community, they're representing your company and your products. Because of that, they have strong communication skills with a really deep understanding of your technology and what it means to build with you. So they can be a really great bridge between all of the different functions that are involved in this feedback process. Developer marketing, of course, those of us on the call, our role here is really around communication and content creation. So communication, whether it's responding to feedback when you get it, sort of that PR aspect of relationship management, or helping to spread the word when feedback has been implemented and you're communicating that back out to your community. That's something that we are part of. And then, of course, content creation. As you're doing that communication, what's the content that you are creating and driving to as part of that program? If you have a separate function for product marketing, that's also a group that you're going to want to have involved here. If they represent the core product, say, you have a technology offering with an API available, they represent that core product. They need to understand the point of view of the developers building with their product in order to fully represent that product and make sure that all of the assets and materials that they're creating include that strong developer experience. If you happen to have a product marketer that is specific to your developer experience, maybe they own your APIs, or you're a platform company and they are responsible for product marketing for your platform, then obviously that's someone that's going to be really closely tied in with this entire group. And they also need to have a really strong point of view of how people are reacting to your products, and what sort of feedback you all are collecting. They also should be involved in that content creation process, as they have that deep understanding of the product that you're talking about. Your technical documentation team should also be involved. You're going to find that your documentation gets probably just as much feedback as any product functionality does, just because of how inherent your documentation is to the entire developer experience. So those folks that maintain those documentations need to be really involved in this process and implementing that feedback as you get it. And your technical support team as well. They are on the front lines and helping customers solve their challenges. So they are a really great source for surfacing some of those common issues, as well as communicating back with customers, sort of what's happening. As you can imagine, that's a really large group of people with really big breadth of responsibility at a company. And a big part of that is because when you're managing a developer program, the types of feedback that you get are going to be probably more than what you initially were thinking of. We often think about product feedback, things like feature enhancements or requests, any bug fixes that might come in, or bug reports that you get from your community, or as well as like innovative direction. What are things that might be net new problems that your customers need to solve? Things like that. That's what we traditionally think of, but when you are managing a developer offering, your documentation is just as a part of your product as the actual technology itself is. So you're probably going to see types of feedback, things about like wording choices. Are you using industry terms or brand terms for certain pieces in your documentation? Is the structure something that's really easy to follow, for your code samples or something like that? Is there clarity in the language that you're using around a particular go live scenario or something like that? Is it really clear what you're asking them to do or what the right next step is? Is the navigation between your documentation simple? Does it make sense going from one area to the next? Do they know where they need to go? Those are all the types of feedback that you'll see there. And then, of course, for our developer marketing and developer evangelism folks, we also get feedback on our programs. Oftentimes, the relationship engagement when you're working with a developer spans a really long period of time. So it's possible that they're going to be engaging with one or more of your programs during that development process. So the types of feedback that you can expect would be like, what is the timing of your program or your communication, and how it relates to their journey? Locations, is there a physical meetup that they want to request that you do, add to your local meetup tours? The technology that you might be using to facilitate your virtual events, for example, they might have feedback around that experience that you're providing. And then, of course, swag, developers love their swag. So you're probably going to get feedback, largely a lot of positive feedback about your swag, but sometimes negative as well, or requests for different types of swag that they might want to see. So, really expand the way that you think about feedback, and the types of feedback that you should be looking out for. Speaking of, expanding how we're thinking about this, I also wanted to provide just some basic places to source feedback from, because I think oftentimes when we think about product feedback, we think about what's submitted to our product team or what's submitted to a sales rep or something like that. That's a little bit more formal, but there's a really large opportunity to collect feedback from all types of sources. Oftentimes developer marketing, like if you have developer marketing at your company or you're really committed to going after a developer community, you're going to have separate profiles for your developers across things like Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. We get a lot of feedback on our social media channels, really just sort of informal feedback, particularly on our YouTube channel. We get a lot of comments on our videos, which is phenomenal. That's been a really great source of feedback for us. You're also going to see feedback on forums like Stack Overflow or Reddit, places like GitHub, where you're often going to get a lot of technical questions. You should also be looking for those feedback nuggets that you're going to receive as they're reacting to answers or challenges or something like that might have cropped up. That can be a really, really great place to take a look at what feedback you might be looking to implement. Of course, look at your owned web properties and in-product opportunities. So if you have a developer center, one thing we do at DocuSign is we've implemented page-specific feedback. So if you're in our guides or a particular code example, at the bottom, you can give us, 5 stars out of 5, of course, if we've earned it, and then a little box for qualitative feedback. That can be a really strong source of feedback that we experience not only for our documentation, but also for the product itself. Inside your demo environment, you might have the opportunity to leverage things like notifications or promotion banners. So keep a lookout for that, where you can proactively ask for some of that feedback. And support tickets. So when you're receiving support tickets and customers are reacting to some of the challenges that they're facing, that's a really good opportunity to source some feedback and some possible solutioning that your customers might be experiencing. You should also be looking at digital listening tools, or often referred to as social listening tools. This can be a really valuable way to see what conversations are happening that you're not tagged in. So of course, when you get proactive feedback on your social media, they're tagging you or they're sending it to you directly. They intend for you to see that. But there's also a lot of passive feedback that happens online. where you can use tools that use, Boolean search queries, this and this, not that, to kind of hone in on the types of conversations that might be being said about your APIs, for example, and understand if there's negative or positive what they're saying. That can be a really, really valuable way to understand what types of things people are highlighting when they're not necessarily coming to you out of that moment of desperation when they've made that decision. Oh, I just have to tell this company how I feel. And then if you're looking for something much more in depth, you have the opportunity for things like customer advisory boards or technical advisory boards. And oftentimes this is a program run by marketers. It can also be run by product or developer evangelism. I've seen it in a lot of different ways, but marketing has a skill set around programs that can be really valuable to something like this, making it a little bit more formal of a program. They kind of operate like forums, but or like a focus group type scenario where you have a group of people who have committed to your company that they want to give you feedback on your technology and work together to solve some solutions that are common in your industry. This is a really beneficial way to get deep product feedback. So that is something that I encourage every company to explore. I think there's also really large opportunity to not overlook questions as feedback, because one thing we know about developers is they do like to self-serve. So if they're coming to you with a question, that means they probably weren't able to find that answer simply or easily on their own. So take that question as an opportunity for feedback and ask yourself how you could improve the experience so that this wasn't something that they would have had to come to you with. If they couldn't find it, it's probably an indication that something wasn't simple enough to find or understand and could be improved. So that's an important thing not to overlook as well. Okay, so let's take a quick pulse check-in on where you're at. I tried to boil this down to four major steps, four major buckets. Gather the feedback, implement the feedback, obviously a very involved step, but communicate that feedback back to your community and measure the impact of your program. This is something that should really be thought of as cyclical, right? It's kind of a never-ending process, but a lot of what we've talked about today is, are you already receiving this feedback? Are you already getting feedback? How do you collect it? How do you gather it? But sometimes you're at a place where you're not actively receiving that feedback from your community yet, and you need to inspire. You kind of need a prompt. So a few simple things that we can do that's within scope and control of marketing are things like asking for it on social media. So if you have those profiles where you're able to, engage directly with your developer community, ask them. Be active and be hyper responsive. It's going to grow over time as you build credibility with your industry as a responsive company. So this is actually a graph of when I first started with DocuSign, and you can see like my first 6 to 8 months, we weren't getting a lot of feedback. And that was something that I really wanted to change. So I became really responsive and, started ensuring that we responded to every message. And I know that that seems simple, but it's important to be really diligent about, and it does grow over time. So that's a really great way to develop that two-way communication with your community. You can add it as a call to action in your blogs and emails. Really think of it as ingrained within your communication and that journey that a developer is going to have with you. So also, think of course beyond your blogs and emails, but if you have an area where people can go and submit feedback, for example, at DocuSign, it's feedback.docusign.com, where our product team is monitoring that site. That's a really great thing, a really great, resource to embed in all of your communications. Similarly, leverage those end product communication tools, like I mentioned, if you have notification centers or the ability to display promotion banners in either your demo environment or your production environment, if you have the ability to target based on a job role or something like that. In product communications can also be a really great way to gather feedback. But perhaps the most important step as this whole of this whole journey is implementing that feedback, which is where that commitment from product really comes into play. So making sure that your organization is dedicated to implementing that feedback is incredibly important. This is the step that allows you to really build that brand affinity. So if you take that time to listen to your community, understand their pain points, and unblock what they're asking for from you, you're going to get that brand love. That's where you start to get kind of that Salesforce effect, where you get really, really passionate folks that know that you are invested in them just as they're invested in you. You're also going to increase loyalty. So developers, it can take a really long time to build an integration. Here at DocuSign, it could take anywhere from a month to 18 months, depending on the complexity of your integration. So if they're spending that much time with your technology, if they have the opportunity to leverage that knowledge either in a future role or in a different team within the same company, who knows, if that type of problem comes up again, they're going to be a lot more likely to bring your technology along with them and that historic knowledge, assuming that that was a good experience. If it wasn't a good experience, they were a lot more likely to give your competitor a try, because at that point, what do they have to lose? So it's a great way to increase that loyalty as a developer might move between companies. Also an opportunity to grow your recommenders network. That's still one of the most credible ways that any company has to grow their product adoption, is just colleagues asking colleagues or peers at other companies what types of ways that they solve their problems. The same is true for developers. So when you do that work to really invest in that community and that feedback that you're receiving, then they know that that's going to be a long-term credible company that that they're going to want to recommend to their peers. And then it's really the role of developer marketing, developer evangelism to work together to get those enhancements communicated back out to your community. Don't overlook this step. It's really important to kind of harken back when you announce or release new things, to call back when those things were community sourced. That can be really powerful. Development cycles can be long. It could take 6 months to a year to solve a particular problem or address a particular piece of feedback. And people's memories are not that long. So remind them when you go to do that communication for your new releases, and make sure that you tell that story and connect those dots for them. Link that tweet if it was received in a tweet, link that community forum post if you found it in a community forum. It'll be not only valuable for the folks that submitted the feedback, but for everybody else to see that you're taking feedback seriously and that you're closing that loop. That's really powerful. And then, of course, measure your impact. This is something that can be done through a number of different ways. You can use a net promoter score. You can use a customer satisfaction score. You can also look at things like community engagement over time. If you can look at how a community sourced piece of feedback improved these metrics for your company and understand how it's affecting adoption, that can be a really, really powerful tool to use when you're doing planning and looking at resourcing for how much of your work is going to be community sourced. So definitely, as much as you can connect that back in the actual numbers, the better. We've talked a lot about, some best practices, some ways of thinking, the people who need to be involved. Let's talk about managing a program really quickly. I just want to pass on a couple of best practices that you should be implementing. Make sure you're collecting all of your feedback in a singular source. This is probably one of the best ways to make sure that all of your stakeholders across the business keep themselves on the same page. Jira can be really great for this. That's what we use, but obviously there are a lot of other different tools out there. This next one is a hard one lesson for me. I learned it the hard way. Ensure you have structure for labeling and tagging those sources. So those first 6 months that I was here at DocuSign, we weren't receiving a lot of feedback. I didn't put a lot of thought into labeling and tagging. But what I learned is that over time, as we were discussing particular customer issues, we had this need to be able to go back and take a look at how many things, how many times did we see this particular issue being reported? How many different types of feedback did we receive about this particular process? And I didn't have the ability to do that. So we had to do some auditing, go back through some of our tickets and audit. So save yourself the trouble and do that up front. Host a regular monthly meeting with your stakeholders, monthly at least, if you can. I wouldn't do less than quarterly. So, definitely try to keep that regular. In this meeting, you should be looking to read out new insights. All of these different groups are coming together, and sometimes it's not always inherent how a learning that your technical documentation team might have had and the way that they communicate might impact how your developer evangelist is looking at new content creation, for example. So that can be really important to share out across team members. Review your previous commits from the program. This is huge to ensure that everybody stays accountable for the program and the work that you're committing to your community. And then review those KPIs and metrics every single month. Last but not least, do not skip communicating that progress back out to your leadership and key stakeholders. This can save you a lot of time. It's something that you don't always see the importance of until you're not doing it. So, save yourself some of that trouble and make sure you're regularly communicating that progress back out to leadership, because they're making a lot of their decisions based on resourcing and where they should and could be putting their time. So those are some of my nuggets of wisdom to share with you. Thank you all so much for spending the time. Feel free to send me a message if you have any questions, and best of luck. Thank you.